I lived in a quiet, suburban neighborhood, in a house that James and I bought 10 years ago. It was meant to be our forever home, the place we'd fill with laughter and memories. I work from home as a graphic designer, which gave me the flexibility to support James as his career as a sales director took off, demanding more of his time with late nights and frequent travel. Our life, from the outside, was perfect, stable, comfortable, and built on what I thought was a foundation of unbreakable trust. But a single whispered sentence before he was wheeled into surgery was about to shatter that illusion and expose a devastating truth I never saw coming. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. The hospital corridor was sterile and cold, a stark contrast to the storm of anxiety brewing inside me. James was being prepped for major heart surgery, a triple bypass that had come out of nowhere. One minute, he was complaining about chest pains after his morning run. The next, we were surrounded by a flurry of doctors using words like critical blockage and immediate intervention. He lay on the gurney, looking smaller and more vulnerable than I had ever seen him. His usual confident smile was replaced by a tight, pale line. I held his hand, my own trembling slightly. "It's going to be okay," I whispered, trying to convince myself as much as him. "The surgeon is the best in the state. You'll be back on your feet complaining about my design clients in no time." He managed a weak smile, his eyes filled with a fear that mirrored my own. A nurse signaled it was time. I leaned in to kiss his forehead, my heart aching with a mixture of love and terror. As I pulled back, he gripped my hand tighter, his voice a strained, urgent whisper that was almost lost in the hospital's ambient hum. "Ellie, if something happens to me, check the attic, the old lockbox behind the Christmas decorations." I frowned, confused. "The attic? James, what are you talking about? Nothing is going to happen." "Just promise me," he insisted, his voice cracking. "Promise me you'll check it." The nurse began to wheel him away. "I promise," I called after him, my mind reeling. "But it won't be necessary." He was gone, the gurney disappearing through a set of double doors, leaving me alone in the echoing hallway. His words hung in the air, heavy and ominous. The attic. We hadn't stored anything important up there for years. It was a dusty, forgotten space filled with holiday kitsch, old baby clothes we never got to use, and memories I tried not to dwell on. I spent the next 6 hours in the waiting room, pacing a trench in the worn linoleum. My best friend, Maria, sat with me, offering lukewarm coffee and a solid, comforting presence. She's a lawyer, always logical and head level, and she tried to rationalize James's strange request. "He's scared, Ellie," she said softly. "People say weird things when they're facing their own mortality. He's probably thinking about some old life insurance policy he forgot to tell you about. Don't read too much into it." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the look in his eyes wasn't just fear. It was something else. Guilt. It was a look I hadn't seen before, and it sent a sliver of ice through my veins. Why would a forgotten document warrant such a desperate last-minute plea? The surgery was a success. The doctor came out, his face tired but assuring, and told me James was stable and in recovery. The relief was so overwhelming it almost brought me to my knees. Maria drove me home, insisting I get some rest before the hospital visiting hours began the next morning. But as I walked into our dark, empty house, the silence felt different. It was heavier, charged with the weight of James's whispered words. I looked up at the ceiling, at the pull-down cord for the attic stairs, and knew that sleep was impossible. I had to know what was in that lockbox. I had to understand the guilt I saw in my husband's eyes. Taking a deep breath, I pulled on the cord, and the rickety wooden stairs unfolded, leading me up into the darkness. I had made a promise, and despite the dread coiling in my stomach, I intended to keep it. The air in the attic was thick with the scent of dust and forgotten time. A single bare bulb cast long, dancing shadows across stacks of boxes and old furniture draped in white sheets, making them look like silent, sleeping ghosts. I navigated the cramped space, my footsteps echoing on the wooden floorboards, until I reached the corner where we stored the Christmas decorations. Behind a leaning tower of red and green plastic tubs, I saw it. A small black metal lockbox, coated in a fine layer of dust. It was unassuming, the kind of thing you'd buy at an office supply store. I pulled it out, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was locked with a simple 3-digit combination lock. My mind raced. A birthday? An anniversary? I tried our wedding date, 6/15. Nothing. My birthday, 9/23. Click. The lock sprang open. A cold wave of nausea washed over me. He had used my birthday. The gesture, which once would have felt intimate and sweet, now seemed sick and twisted, a prelude to a betrayal I couldn't yet comprehend. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside, there was no old life insurance policy, no sentimental keepsakes from his childhood. There were stacks of paper, neatly organized. The first thing I saw was a passport, but it wasn't James's. The photo was of him, but the name was different. Daniel Anderson. The birthday was the same, but the birthplace was listed as a small town in Oregon I'd never heard of. Beneath the passport was a driver's license with the same name, then a credit card statement, also for Daniel Anderson. My breath hitched. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the list of charges. Weekly payments to a luxury apartment complex downtown, one I'd never recognized. Charges from restaurants I'd never been to, flower shops I didn't know, and a recurring monthly payment to a high-end jewelry store. The statements went back 5 years. My world started to tilt on its axis. This wasn't just a few unexplained charges on our joint account. This was a completely separate, meticulously constructed identity, a secret life running parallel to ours. Deeper in the box, I found a thick manila envelope. Inside was a birth certificate. A little girl. Her name was Lily Anderson, born 3 years ago. Father, Daniel Anderson. Mother, Sophia Dubois. Sophia. The name rang a faint bell. James had mentioned her a few times. A brilliant young marketing coordinator at his company. He'd said she was a rising star, instrumental in landing a huge new account last year. I'd even met her once, briefly, at a company holiday party. She was young, beautiful, and had looked at me with an expression that I had mistaken for polite deference. Now I saw it for what it was: pity. The final items in the box were a set of keys and a deed. The deed was for a house, a charming 2-storied colonial in a neighboring town, purchased 2 years ago under the name Daniel Anderson. The keys had a small tag attached, labeled "Our Home." I sank back on my heels, the dusty floorboards cold beneath me. The contents of the lockbox were spread out like the wreckage of a plane crash. My marriage, my life, my entire reality, all of it was a lie. James wasn't just a cheating husband, he was 2 different people. He had another name, another home, and another family. He had a 3-year-old daughter with a woman from his office. The whisper in the hospital hallway wasn't a confession born of fear. It was a contingency plan. He wasn't worried about dying. He was worried about me not finding the breadcrumbs to his secret life. Maybe he thought that in the event of his death, I would be the one to quietly clean up his mess, to sort out the legal and financial tangle of his duplicity. Or maybe, in some twisted way, he wanted me to know. The shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard rage that solidified in my chest. It was a clean, purifying anger. I thought of the years I had dedicated to our marriage, the sacrifices I had made for his career, the nights I had spent alone while he was on business trips. I thought of the infertility treatments, the heartbreak of our shared dream of a family that never materialized, a pain that he had pretended to share, while he had a daughter with someone else. I sat there in the dusty silence of the attic, the evidence of his betrayal laid out before me, and I made a different kind of promise. He had built a life of lies, a house of cards. I wasn't just going to watch it fall. I was going to be the one to light the match.
The next few days were a masterclass in deception. I played the part of the devoted wife to perfection. I brought James his favorite books and bland hospital-approved broth. I updated his concerned colleagues and fielded calls from his worried parents, assuring them that he was on the mend. All the while, Maria and I were working behind the scenes, laying the groundwork for his downfall. Our first move was financial. Armed with a power of attorney I'd had for years, a document he'd insisted on for emergencies, Maria helped me contact our bank. We didn't freeze the accounts outright, as that would send up an immediate red flag. Instead, we put a transfer alert and a daily withdrawal limit on them, low enough to prevent any large sums from being moved, but high enough to cover normal expenses so he wouldn't notice from his hospital bed. Next, we hired a private investigator, a discreet professional Maria had used for high-profile divorce cases. His name was Ben, a former cop with a quiet demeanor and sharp, observant eyes. I gave him everything: the fake name, the address in the next town, Sophia's photo, and a timeline of James's business trips. "I don't just want confirmation," I told him, sitting in his small, nondescript office. "I want everything. I want to know who knew. I want to know how deep this goes." Ben delivered his first report within 48 hours. It was more damning than I could have imagined. James hadn't just hidden his second life from me, he'd integrated it with a part of his professional world. Sophia wasn't just his mistress, she was his co-conspirator. Ben's surveillance photos showed them meeting with clients together, presenting themselves as a husband and wife team. They were a power couple, Dan and Sophia Anderson, and some of James's clients were in on the charade. The report included a detail that made my blood run cold. James's boss, a man named Marcus, who had been to our house for dinner multiple times, was listed as a reference on the lease application for Daniel Anderson's downtown apartment. He knew. He had known for years. He had sat at my dinner table, praised my cooking, and asked about our vacation plans, all while my husband was living a double life. The betrayal was suffocating. It wasn't just James anymore. It was a network of people who had enabled his deceit. The PI's financial deep dive was even more revealing. James had a separate, significant investment portfolio under his fake name, funded by the commissions he'd skimmed. He had been planning this for a long time. This wasn't just a midlife crisis affair, it was a meticulously planned exit strategy. He was building a new life, and I was the one who was going to be left behind with the shell of a marriage and depleted savings. Armed with this new information, I planned my next visit to the hospital. James was getting stronger, more alert. He was starting to get restless, asking about emails and client files on his laptop. "Don't you worry about a thing," I said, adjusting the blanket on his bed. "I called Marcus yesterday to give him an update. He sends his best. Such a good friend to you." I watched his face carefully, not a flicker of emotion. He was a master at this. "By the way," I added casually, "I was cleaning out some old files at home and came across some of your old commission statements. It's amazing how much you've earned over the years. We're so lucky you've been so successful." This time I saw it, a brief, sharp look of alarm in his eyes before it was masked by a tired smile. "It's all for us, Ellie, for our future." "I know," I said, my voice laced with irony that was lost to him. "I was thinking, once you're out of here, we should sit down with our financial advisor and do a full review. Make sure everything is in order for our retirement." The color drained from his face. He said, "There's no need for that," quickly. "I have it all under control. You just focus on me getting better." I had him. He was trapped in that hospital bed, powerless. He could sense the walls closing in, but he couldn't do anything about it. He had underestimated me. He had seen me as the quiet, supportive, artsy wife, not as a woman who could be strategic and ruthless. He had made a grave mistake. That night, I drove to the other house. I parked down the street, my heart pounding, and watched as Sophia pulled into the driveway. She got out of the car and went to the back to unbuckle a small child from a car seat. The little girl, Lily, laughed as Sophia lifted her into her arms. They looked happy. They looked real. And for a moment, the rage faltered, replaced by a profound, soul-crushing sadness. He had stolen so much from me. Not just money, not just fidelity, but the dream of a family. A dream he had made a reality with someone else. I drove away before they could see me. the sadness hardening back into resolve. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. It was about taking back my life and ensuring that he and everyone who helped him would face the consequences of their choices. The web was woven. It was almost time to pull the strings. Chapter 5. Weaving a web of consequences. The day James was scheduled to be discharged from the hospital was the day I set my plan into motion. He thought he was coming home to a quiet recovery. He had no idea he was walking into the epicenter of his own implosion. My first call was to the HR department at his company. I used a calm, concerned voice, identifying myself as Eleanor, James's wife. I explained that in light of his serious health scare, I was helping him get his affairs in order and had discovered some financial irregularities that seemed to be linked to his work accounts. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding," I said, my voice trembling slightly for effect. "But I found a separate bank account with large deposits from what look like company commission checks, and it's tied to an address and a name I don't recognize. I'm just so worried that someone might be taking advantage of him, especially now that he's so vulnerable." The HR representative went from sympathetic to alarmed in seconds. Embezzlement, fraud, and liability are magic words in the corporate world. I mentioned the name Sophia Dubois and suggested that she seemed to be involved. I knew this would trigger an immediate internal investigation, one that would be far more thorough and damaging than anything I could do on my own. I also made an anonymous call to the company's ethics hotline, reporting that a senior sales director was conducting business under an alias and potentially violating company policy by having an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate. My second call was to Marcus, James's boss. "Marcus, it's Ellie," I said, my tone grave. "I'm on my way to pick up James, but I have to talk to you. I've uncovered something terrible. James has been hiding a second life from me, a fake name, another family, and it looks like you knew. Your name is on a lease agreement." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I let it hang there. "Ellie?" he stammered. "Save it." I cut him off, my voice turning to ice. The company's HR department is now aware of a potential fraud investigation linked to James and Sophia. They know a senior manager may have been complicit in covering it up. I imagine they'll be in touch with you shortly. I just thought you deserved a heads up, as a friend. I hung up, imagining the panic erupting in his corner office. His career was now tied to James's sinking ship. My final preparations were at home. I packed all of James's belongings into boxes. His expensive suits, his golf clubs, his collection of single malt scotch. I stacked them neatly in the garage. I then went into my design studio and gathered every financial document, every piece of evidence from the lockbox, and every report from the private investigator. I made 3 copies of everything, one for me, one for Maria, and one for what was to come. I changed the locks on all the doors. When I arrived at the hospital, James was sitting in a wheelchair by the entrance, looking weak but eager. He had a bag packed at his feet. He smiled when he saw me, a genuine, relieved smile that almost made me feel a pang of something. But then I remembered the photo of him with his other family, and the feeling vanished, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. "Ready to go home?" I asked, my voice bright. The car ride was tense. He tried to make small talk, but I kept my answers short. He must have sensed the shift in my demeanor, so he grew quiet, staring out the window. As we pulled into our driveway, he saw the locksmith's van pulling away. "What's going on?" he asked, a note of confusion in his voice. "Just a security upgrade," I said smoothly. "After your health scare, I realized we needed to be more careful." I helped him out of the car and walked him to the front door. I slipped my new key into the lock, opened the door, and then turned to face him, blocking his entry. "This is as far as you go, James," I said, my voice calm and even. He stared at me, his face a mask of confusion. "What are you talking about, Ellie? Let me in. I need to rest." "Your things are in the garage," I continued, ignoring his plea. "I suggest you call your other wife, Sophia, to come pick you up. I'm sure she and your daughter Lily are very worried about your Dan." The color drained from his face. He looked like he had been struck by lightning. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "It's over," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "I know everything. The lockbox, the fake name, the address in the next town.
Sophia's photo, and a timeline of James's business trips. I know about the money you've stolen from us to fund your little fantasy life. He finally found his voice, a desperate, croaking whisper. Ellie, please, I can explain. There's nothing to explain, I said, holding up a hand. You've made your choice. You chose that life. Now you get to live it, exclusively. From my purse, I pulled a thick envelope and handed it to him. These are divorce papers. Maria, my lawyer, drew them up. I think you'll find the terms are more than fair, considering the circumstances. I'm keeping the house, I'm keeping my share of our assets. The rest, including the mountain of legal trouble you're about to face with your company, is all yours.